Hello everyone, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana and today I came up with part 3rd video in Laravel Ajax CRUD series. In the last video, we fetched data from the database and loaded to this view. Also in this view, we have rendered the created to-dos list. Thereafter, we applied jQuery data table in order to get pagination, search functionality and number of displayed records. And at last, we implemented a functionality to append the newly created to-do in this table. That means whenever we will create a new to-do from this to-do model, it will be automatically appended to this table without refreshing this entire page. Now in the today's video, we will be working on this action as view, edit and update functionality. For creating a new to-do, we already created a form using this Bootstrap model. So we can reuse this for view and edit functionality. Okay, so let's get started. So here I have navigated to the code and this is our index.blade file. Inside this we have created one table and we have this create to do button. So by clicking on this create to do button, we are toggling a model. So inside these action buttons, we have to pass additional class in order to create click functionality. Alright, so I will pass btn view for view button, same thing for edit and this is for delete. And in hyperlink, we have to pass JavaScript void because we will be creating click functionality using jQuery. And here in the action, we required some more parameter as data attribute. So I will be using this HTML data ID and here we will pass this to do ID. Okay, let's copy and add it for others. Yeah, this is done. Now let's come to the script file. And here we appended last created to do in the table. So similarly, we have to append that data attribute and here we can write in this way. So we are receiving Ajax response in this response variable and from here we are fetching response.todoId. So we can write like this way. Let's copy and add for others. And for hyperlink, we will add JavaScript void. Yeah, this is done. Now if we will check out to the browser, let me refresh and let's inspect these buttons. We can see we have this data ID attribute. Alright, so by clicking on this button, we will receive this data ID attribute in this JavaScript. And from there, we will make Ajax request. So now let's create click functionality. So initially we will start with view to do. Okay, so here I will write .btn view dot click function and inside this click function I will create one variable as to do ID and I will receive current data ID. Okay, so I will write $this dot data and this ID attribute. Okay, now let's check what we are receiving from this to do ID. Okay, save it and again let's open this inspect console. And here let's try to click on view. Yes, so we received the clicked row to do ID. Similarly, try on others. Yes, we are getting correct IDs here. So now let's proceed with the Ajax request. So better we can create a common function to make Ajax request so that we can use that function in view and edit as well. So just after this button click, let's create another function as fetch to do. And here I will pass to do ID as a parameter. If we have to do ID, then based on that ID, I will make Ajax request. So I will write $.ajax and inside this $.ajax, we have to pass URL. Okay, so I will pass URL in the backtick form just like to do's and after slash, we have to append this to do ID. So from Ajax request, we will be getting a specific to do based on the given ID. Now in the next parameter, we have to define type. So this time type will be get because we will have to fetch a to do based on the given ID. So we will be using get method. Now next we have to define success function. So after receiving to do, we have to capture. So I will pass as a response and similarly we have to capture error response as well. So we will write error. So in the error, I will simply console it. So I will write console.error and error. Now let's call this function inside this click function. So here I will check if we have to do ID, then I will call this function fetch to do and inside this fetch to do I will pass this to do ID as a parameter. This is done. And before capturing this success response, we have to write some functionality inside the controller, because this Ajax request will make a call to this controller function. Okay, so let's move to this controller, and here inside this show function we will be receiving Ajax call. Alright, so currently in this show function we are receiving ID as a parameter. So instead of fetching the single ID and finding to do based on that given ID, we will be using route model binding concept. So Laravel provides route model binding, in which we don't have to fetch data based on the given ID. Instead of that, we can bind that ID from that model directly. Alright, so we can call the model directly, and here we can create model instance. Okay, because we have created a resource controller, so it will be connected directly with that ID. Now let's put dump and die, and here let's display this to do. Save it, come back to browser, refresh this application, and let's click on view. So in the network response we will be able to see the given ID model. Alright, similarly if we'll click on this fifth ID to do, then from Ajax request the ID as 5 is passed, and here in this response we received to do with the given ID 5. So from this controller we can return it directly as JSON format, return response JSON, and here we will write status success, and we can directly return that to do. And before returning, I will put one if condition, we have to do, then we'll return this JSON response. Else we can copy and paste it here, and instead of success I will write failed, and instead of to do I will return one message as failed, no to do found. Now let's capture this response in this script.js. So inside this success function response we have to capture this to do. Okay, here I will define one variable as const to do, and this to do will have response dot to do. That means whatever we are receiving from this response we will capture that in a to do variable. And before capturing this I will put one condition, if response dot status triple equals success. If we have success response, that means if we receive to do, then we can capture that in a to do variable. And after receiving this to do, we have to toggle this model. So if we will switch back to browser, and here we have this create to do button. So by clicking on this we were opening this to do, and from here we were saving to do. So we have to open the same model, and in that model form we will populate the to do details. So for triggering this model we already created model id dot model toggle function. Alright, so here I will toggle this model, and before toggling this model we have to populate data over the form. Again I will have to write to do model, and inside this to do model I will have to capture the input selector. So let's open this model, and here for this to do title and description we already give an id attribute as title and description. So let's copy these IDs, and here I will write to do model has title dot val. Alright, and inside this value I will have to pass to do dot title. Okay, similarly we have to write for description, so we will be writing description, and that we are receiving from to do dot description. And after populating this value this model will be toggled. So let's check this first. So if I'll click on view, yes, inside this to do model form we can see the values are populated. Now we have to hide this submit button, and we have to change this create to do title as well, and also we have to make this form as disabled so that these input fields values cannot be altered. So let's do this. So after receiving these values we have to add disable attribute. So we will be capturing this form id. We already created form id as to do dash form. So we will be copy this, and here we will write to do form all input comma to do form text area. Okay, dot attr means attribute, and we will add disabled attribute. Also we have to hide that submit button, so we can write as to do form button type equals submit dot add class d none. So here we will be adding bootstrap class as display none, and also we have to change the model title. So we already given one class attribute to this model title, and even id we have. So let's copy this id, and here let's change this title to dot text as to do detail, and at last this model will be toggled. Okay, save it. Now let's refresh this one. Now let's try to click on view. So here the form inputs are disabled. Also this title is changed and this submit button is hidden. Now if we will inspect these elements and check out this form, and still we have these form actions. Okay, so in case for the security point of view, if you want to remove this action as well, then we can write to do form dot remove attribute action. Okay, save it, and here we'll click on view. Now inside this form we don't have any action, so this is fine. So now we will be working on this edit functionality. So let's create another click event, and this time we will be writing for edit to do. So we will be using btn edit dot click function, and here again we have to receive id and we have to call this fetch to do function. So we can copy and paste these two lines here. So we will be receiving data id attribute in the same way, and we have to call this fetch to do function. But while calling this fetch to do function, we will have to pass some additional parameter as well, because we want to differentiate view and edit here based on the parameter. Inside this Ajax function, after getting this Ajax response, we are making these input fields disabled, and even we removed the form action and we hide the submit button. Okay, so before calling this function, here we have to define one variable as const mode equals view. Okay, and here we will pass this mode variable, and let's copy it, define it in the edit as well, and here we will change this value to edit, and similarly we will pass this variable in this function as well. This is done, and here we have to receive this variable in the form of mode, and by default it will be null. So based on the given value, I will add condition. That means I want to make form inputs disabled only on view. So I will write if mode equals view, then I will put these lines inside this condition. Okay, and this to do title, also this form action. Else if mode is edit, then inside edit I will just copy and add it here, and for the edit I want to remove the disable attribute, so I will write remove attr, means attribute disabled. Okay, and also we have to remove display none class from submit button, so I will write remove class dnone, and this model title will be update to do. And regarding the form action, we have to give form action, so we will have to write attr action, and here in the second parameter we will have to define form action. Okay, so for passing this form action we required application base URL that we can get from Laravel helper function itself. So for getting this base URL we will be using Laravel URL helper function, but in this external script.js file we cannot use Laravel helper function. So what we can do, inside this app blade, this is our master blade file. So before this custom script, I will create one script function as a script type equals text / JavaScript, and inside this script I will define one variable as const base URL equals, and here I will use Laravel helper function URL, and I will pass /. So inside this blade file we can define one JavaScript variable, and inside this we can use Laravel helper function. Now let's try to access this variable in this script.js. Here I will just console it base URL. Now let's come to the browser, and here let's refresh it. Yes, so we are getting this base URL localhost 8000. So let's remove this console, and here in the second parameter we will pass this base URL. Okay, so after this base URL we have to pass the route endpoint name as Todos and followed by ID. So what we can do, we can again wrap this in backtick base URL, and / we have to write Todos, and after this again we have to pass the current to do ID. So we are getting to do in this to do variable, so we can write to do.id. So this form action will be base URL / Todos and then ID. Now let's come to the browser, refresh it. Let's click on view. So on view, we have the input field hidden and to do title is to do detail, and the model title is to do detail. Also the submit button is hidden. Now let's try to click on edit button. So on edit, we have the model title is update to do and the form inputs are enabled, and also this submit button is visible here. Now let's check the form action. So this form action is localhost 8000/todo/1. Alright. So this edit is fine. Now we have to work on the update functionality. That means when we will click on save, this form action should be triggered and this to do should be updated. So let's implement that. So let's switch back to code, and here we will implement the update functionality. So we already create to do submit functionality. If we will check here, then we already defined this to do form.validate, means initially this to do form will be validated and then we are triggering the submit handler function. Okay, and here we use this post method. So for updating this to do, we will be using the same handler function, and here we will just change this parameter based on the type. So what we can do on edit, we can append one input type hidden so that we can capture the to do ID, like which to do is going to be updated. So what we can do in the edit mode, we will append one extra input as type hidden, just like to do form dot append, and here we will use input type equals hidden. Okay, and we will pass value as to do dot id, and we can pass id attribute as, let's suppose, hidden to do id. Okay, and we will capture this input type hidden in the form submit event. Okay, so before making this Ajax call, we will fetch that to do id from this input type hidden. So we will write hash hidden to do id dot val. Okay, and we will use one breakpoint as debugger so that the submit functionality will be halted. Now let's come to the browser, refresh, and let's click on edit. So on edit, we can see inside this form we have now one input type hidden with value of to do id. Now if we will click on save, we can see we received this hidden input type id. So here we will differentiate this form action and type based on this to do id. That means when we have the to do id, it is going to update, and at the very first when we won't have the to do id, that means in that case this form will be in create mode. Currently it is in update mode. So let's come to the code and let's implement this functionality. So here I will define one variable as const method type equals, so this value will depend on this to do id. So if we have to do id, then this will be put request, else it will be post request. Okay, so let's copy this, and here we will pass this variable as method type. And same thing for URL, we can create one variable as const form action, and here we can fetch this action from this form object. So we will write form dot attr, means attribute, and from action attribute we will fetch this form action. Alright, now we will replace the Ajax URL with this variable. Now switch back to browser, click on edit, and we can see we have this form action. So on submit, this form will be submitted to this form action. Now let's click on save, check the network request, and if we will check the headers and payload, then inside this payload we have this title and description, and in the headers we can check this request URL is submitted to todo/id. Alright, and this request method is put. So now we have to handle this inside this to do controller. So on update, it will come to this update function. Instead of this string $id, again we can use route model binding. So we will write to do model, and again we will create to do model object. Now let's add dump and die again, and we will see request all, means what we are getting from this request, and this to do object as well. Let's come back to the browser, click on edit, let's try to update something and click on save. So on save, we received this form request and that model instance as well. Okay, so now let's proceed with the update functionality. So here we will write if condition, if we have this to do, that means based on the given id, if the to do object is returned, then we will use model eloquent save function. Okay, so we can assign model instance attribute as title, and this will have the request title value. Okay, same thing for description. and this is coming from request description. Okay, and at last we will be using this to-do model save function, and once this to-do is saved, we will return response JSON. So we can copy this one and we can add it here, and for the else part again we will copy this one and add it here, and this message will be unable to update to do, and this else is not required because we are returning directly. Yeah, so from this update function it will return the updated to do. This message will be success to do is updated. Now let's capture this response in this script.js. Now inside this success response, we have to check if response is returned for edit or create. Okay, so we have this do ID. After this response, we will add one if condition. If we have to do ID, it means this is for update and this is for create. So here we will write else condition. Okay, and this will be wrapped inside this else condition. If to do is updated, then we don't have to append a new row inside this to do table. Instead of this, we have to append in the current row. For that, we have to identify the current row again, so that we will be able to understand which row is going to be updated. Okay, let me refresh this one. Suppose if I will click on this second do, this is do ID third. So we will have to understand if I will click on this edit, then this updated value should be replaced with the current value. So in order to do that, we will have to append some additional field inside this ER, so that we will be able to identify this row. So what we can do, inside this index blade, we will give ID attribute. So we will write ID and we will pass ID as to do, and we will concatenate this to do ID. So for every row there will be unique ID. Now let's check the browser, refresh it, and yes, against every table row we have the unique ID. By clicking on edit, if we will update this to do, then we have to append that updated value with that selected row. Now we have to assign the same unique ID to this newly created to do. So here we have to give ID equals to do, and we will append that response.todo.id. Now let's complete this functionality. So here we will use that selector as, here we will use this selector as to do underscore and to do ID, and inside this td, and we will locate to the second child element, that is nth child selector. So we have to append title value in the second td and this description for third td. Okay, so we will be using nth child 2, and then we will write HTML response.todo.title. Now let's duplicate this, and this time I will write this for description, and this will be appended in the third td, third column. Now let's come to the browser, refresh this application, and let's try to update this first one. Click on edit, Laravel 10 Ajax CRUD update. I will write update. Let's click on save. To do is updated. That updated to do is reflected inside this table td. Now let's check by refreshing this application again. Yes, this is, we have updated to do. Now let's check by updating some other to do. Form validation with form handling. Click on save. Yes, this is updated in the real time. So view and edit functionality is done. Alright, now we have one issue here. So let's suppose firstly I have opened this view and this form is in disabled mode. Alright, now immediately without refreshing this form, I will click on create to do. So we can see in the create mode, this form is opened in view mode. That means the form inputs are disabled. So we have to create some functionality to reset those disabled inputs in create mode itself. So let's do that. So inside this create to do btn click function, before triggering this model, we will have to reset those attributes. So again, I will copy these lines, okay, and come to this create to do btn function, and here before toggling this model, I will add these lines, and when we'll click on this create to do button, firstly it will remove the disable attributes from the inputs, and that submit button will be visible, and this model title will be create to do, and this form action will be base URL /todos, because we don't have any ID attribute and it will be directly post request, and we don't require this input ID hidden. Also, we will have to reset the form input values. So we will have to add val attribute to null. So let's copy these two lines again and add it here, and inside this value we will write null for this description as well. And also we will have to remove that hidden input field that we have created just to capture that hidden input ID. So we will have to remove this input in create mode. So let's add hidden to do ID dot remove. Now let's come to the browser. Okay, now let's refresh this application. Click on view, click on edit. Yes, now try to create another to do. So we will write jQuery form validation jQuery. Okay, now let's click on save. Yes, to do is created and the last created to do is reflected here. Now let's try these actions in newly created to do. So if we try to click on view and edit, this is not working. Now let me check this by inspecting it. Okay, so for the newly created to do, we are not adding classes as btn view, edit and delete. So let's add it. We forgot to add the class. Yes, so here we will have to add btn view as we already added here, btn view, btn edit and btn delete. This view and edit action is not working on the dynamically added rows. So for that we will have to add event delegation in the click event functionality. So here, yes, so we added this btn view click function. So instead of doing this, we will use event delegation. So we will be using the parent selector as to do table dot on click of btn view. So we have this btn view and then function, and same thing we will have to add for edit as well. Replace this and let's change this to btn edit, because we are adding the last created to do dynamically and appending that row in this table. Okay, so for dynamically added rows, the directly click event won't work, so we will have to use this event delegation method. Let's come to the browser, refresh it. Now let's create another to do, form request handling in Laravel. Okay, click on save. Yes, so this is the last created row. Now let's try to click on view. Yes, so on view this model is opened. Now let's check for edit. Yes, also for edit it is working. Now let's try to update this to do. Click on save, and yes, this to do is updated now. So that's it for this video. I hope this video will be helpful to you. In the next video, we will be working on this delete functionality, and also we will be implementing sweet alert for the dialog confirmation in Laravel. So thanks for joining us today. See you in the next video.